You're listening to Campus Killings, brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including The Murder in My Family, DNA ID, Zodiac Speaking, Scene of the Crime, Missing Persons, Beyond Bizarre True Crime, and Citizen Detective. All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe where you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode.
This case brings us to Moscow, Idaho, where 4 college students were brutally murdered. Today we're doing things a little bit differently. Usually Amy and I will take turns kind of presenting a case, but we're going to work on this one together. We're going to tell the story and all the different aspects together today. And in today's case, we are covering a story that is very current and very fast-moving. And there have been daily articles, regular updates from the police, a wealth of YouTube videos, international coverage, and online crime forums that have sprung up about this tragic situation that unfolded in Idaho. 4 students at the University of Idaho in Moscow, Idaho, were brutally murdered in their off-campus rental home on November 13th, 2022. This was a shocking crime. This is a shocking crime that terrified the nation with its violence and the mystery surrounding it. But now, Amy, 7 weeks after the murders, Idaho authorities have made an arrest. A little bit about Moscow, Idaho. Moscow is a small city of about 26,000 residents. It's a college town. The university has 11,000 students there, and it's generally considered a safe place. The last murder in Moscow was in 2015. Residents reportedly did not lock their doors and walked alone at night, but no more. Since the murders, many students left town in fear, opting to finish their semester from home thanks to the university's offer of online class participation because of the pervasive fear in the community. Let's talk about our victims before we get into what happened. Typically, you hear these 4 students, but they were people, so let's get to know them a little bit, okay? 21-year-old Kaylee Gonsalves was from Rathdrum, Idaho. She was set to graduate from the university early in December 2022. She was majoring in general studies. She had a job lined up already at a marketing firm in Austin, Texas, and planned to move there in late spring 2023 with a close friend of hers. Kaylee was known as someone who was adventurous, a go-getter, a genuine person who did not mince words. She was the ultimate middle child, her parents said. Kaylee was in Alpha Phi sorority at University of Idaho and had recently amicably broken up with her boyfriend of several years. The two had a dog together named Murphy. Some of Kaylee's relatives believed that Kaylee and Jack, her boyfriend with whom she had broken up, would get back together. But obviously we couldn't know that information. 21-year-old Madison Mogan was from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. She was known as Maddie, and she was best friends with Kaylee. The two grew up together and were truly close. They were always posting videos and photos together and really seemed to appreciate the special bond that they had. They had both been bridesmaids at Kaylee's older sister Olivia's wedding. They had both waited tables at Mad Greek restaurant in town for several years. Maddie was a senior majoring in marketing, and she was also in a sorority, Pi Beta Phi. Maddie's boyfriend, Jake, talked to New York Times about his girlfriend. He said that she was always spreading positivity and loved and committed acts of kindness to others. Quote, "There's no words that I can really describe her, how amazing she was and how wonderful of a person she was," Jake told the publication. Zaina Kernodle, 20, was originally from Post Falls, Idaho, but had moved to Arizona with her family. She was a junior majoring in marketing, and she was also in a sorority, Pi Beta Phi. She had been a gymnast before college, and her sister Jasmine posted on Instagram that, quote, "she truly was once-in-a-lifetime type of person." Zaina's father, Jeffrey, told an Arizona TV station that Zaina was strong-willed and fearless. Zaina had been dating Ethan Chapin since the spring of 2022. 20-year-old Ethan was from Conway, Washington, and played basketball in high school. He also loved soccer and volleyball. He was sporty. Ethan was also a triplet. His brother and sister also attended University of Idaho. His mom, Stacy, said he was literally the life of the party. He made everybody laugh. He was just the kindest person. Apparently, the University of Idaho had Ethan listed as a freshman, but he matriculated in the fall of 2021. Ethan was studying recreation, sport, and tourism management, and he had also pledged the fraternity Sigma Chi. On the night of November 12th, Ethan and the other two of the Chapin triplets went to a dance held by Ethan's sister's sorority.
There was a home football game on Saturday, November 12th. The University of Idaho team, known as the Vandals, was playing against UC Davis. At 8:57 p.m., Kaylee posted a photo to her Instagram account that was taken earlier. And in this photo, you could see Maddie, Zaina, Ethan, and two other housemates that lived with the girls. This was taken earlier in the day, and we could tell by the daylight in the photo, and it was taken on the porch of their home. All are smiling and seemingly extremely happy, with Kaylee's caption reading, quote, "One lucky girl to be surrounded by these people every day." Later that evening, Kaylee and Maddie went to a local bar called the Corner Club at 202 Northwest Main Street. This was in downtown Moscow. They went there at around 10 p.m. and they stayed until approximately 1:30 a.m. At 1:41 a.m., Kaylee and Madison were seen on Twitch video at a local food truck called Grub Wandering Kitchen, or as they like to call it, Grub Truck. This was at 318 South Main Street. Now, the video footage shows them arriving at the truck, and they got in line with the other students waiting for their food. They could be seen chatting with people and walking toward the truck with one guy whose name has never been released to this point. At one point, this guy is seen standing behind them, pulling his hood up over his head. Kaylee and Maddie ordered about $10 worth of carbonara, and they could be seen giggling, chatting, and using their phones as they wait the approximate 10 minutes for their order to come out. At one point, Maddie hugged a different young man hello and then returned to wait with Kaylee for their food. Now, when the two got their food, they disappeared off camera to the left, and the guy in the hoodie can be seen leaving to the right. Maddie and Kaylee were headed home, and they used what has been described as a, quote, private party for a ride home at approximately 1:56 a.m. It is not known who was driving this vehicle, as the name was redacted from the affidavit that police released to the public. And it's also unknown whether this was somebody that the two young women knew prior. Now, Maddie and Kaylee arrived at their residence at 1122 King Road by 2 a.m. This is according to surviving roommates. Meanwhile, as we heard earlier, Ethan went to a dance at his sister's sorority that evening. And around 9 p.m., him and Zaina ended up at a party at his fraternity house, the Sigma Chi house. They had returned to Zaina, Kylie's, and Maddie's home on King Road at approximately 1:45 a.m. So Ethan did not live at the home, but he often spent the night at the large, comfortable home. Perhaps he had a roommate at his own room and he wanted some time with his girlfriend. Between 2:30 a.m. and 2:52 a.m., Kaylee called her ex-boyfriend Jack's phone number numerous times. Maddie had also called his phone about 3 times, starting at 2:44 a.m. It was reported from Kaylee's sister, Olivia, that Kaylee called Jack 6 times between 2:26 a.m. and 2:44 a.m., and Kaylee made a final call to him at 2:52 a.m. Kaylee's sister, who spoke to the New York Times, is the one who reported that Jack was Kaylee's ex-boyfriend. The two had dated for several years, and recently they decided to take a break, but the two were on very good terms. She also said that it was not strange for her sister to frequently call people late at night, and she would often keep calling until they picked up, saying even if it was a mundane question like what she ought to have for a meal. So, Megan, this looks like the kind of situation where you have Kaylee and Maddie sitting home, probably eating their carbonara and drunkenly dialing Jack, probably annoyed that he is ignoring Kaylee, which is why Maddie starts in on calling as well. After this, it is believed that the two fell asleep together in one of the bedrooms on the 3rd floor of the house. There were 2 other residents of the King Road house, 2 female undergraduates, Dylan and Bethany. Each of them were out in Moscow that night as well. In fact, Bethany saw Zaina and Ethan at the Sigma Chi party. Both of these roommates also returned to the home by 2 a.m. We know that Zaina received the DoorDash delivery at approximately 4 a.m., and her cell phone records show that she was using the TikTok app on her phone at 4:12 a.m. Now, this evidence and other information led police to believe that the gruesome murders happened sometime between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m.
And now, a brief word from our sponsors.
Trading shouldn't have barriers. When Robinhood started, it was built to make trading more accessible. Now Robinhood offers more sophisticated trading tools. Experience the future of trading on Robinhood Legend, the all-new desktop platform that harnesses intuitive design to deliver a seamless experience for traders. Free to use with a Robinhood account, Robinhood Legend is designed for how you trade, with powerful charts including custom intervals down to the tick, and over 80 indicators and drawing tools. Trade all your favorite assets, including popular stocks and ETFs, all in one place. Take your trading to the next level by customizing your layout in seconds, and even enter and exit positions in one tap right from the chart with up to 8 charts per layout. The future of trading is fast, powerful, and precise. Experience it now on Robinhood Legend. Sign up today. Investing is risky. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. Other fees may apply.
Have you heard all the stories on the news lately about cold cases being solved by forensic genealogy? Are you fascinated by unsolved mysteries that you wish could be answered? Are you intrigued by DNA technology and its application to cold murder cases? Or do you just love a good story with a satisfying ending? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then I have the podcast for you. DNA ID is the only true crime podcast dedicated exclusively to cold cases solved by forensic genealogy. On my show, you'll get all the behind-the-scenes details on how these cases were brought to closure and how the victims finally got justice. Listen to DNA ID Season 3 starting January 16th, 2023, wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay, so what exactly happened the next morning has not been clarified by the police, but we're going to take this directly from the Moscow police press release. On Sunday morning, November 13th, Dylan and Bethany summoned friends to the residence because they believed one of the second-floor victims had passed out and was not waking up. At 11:58 a.m., a 911 call requested aid for an unconscious person. This call was made from one of the surviving roommates' cell phones inside the residence. Now, multiple people talked with the 911 dispatcher before Moscow police arrived at the location. All right, that from the press release, as I said. But so this is odd. The press release states that someone, an unnamed person, called police from either Dylan or Bethany's phone, and there was confusion as multiple people spoke to the 911 operator. The kids were reporting that someone would not wake up as well. I don't know if you recall this, but not that someone had been killed. But when police officers entered the home, they found a very bloody crime scene. At 2 p.m. on Sunday, the university sent out a vandal alert, notifying students of the homicides and telling them to shelter in place. The order was lifted about 40 minutes later, with police later calling the quadruple homicide an isolated target attack, posing no imminent threat to the community at large. Latah County Coroner Kathy Mabbutt responded to the scene and pronounced Ethan, Zaina, Kaylee, and Maddie dead at noon on the 13th. Autopsies were conducted on the 17th, and the police department after that released the cause of death for all 4. They had been stabbed to death with a large knife, probably the same weapon used on each of the victims. The official cause and manner of death was homicide by stabbing. Kaylee and Maddie were found in the same bed in Maddie's room. Zaina was found on the floor of her bedroom, and Ethan was in the same room at an unspecified location. Dr. Mabbutt stated that the 4 victims were likely asleep when they were attacked. Some had defensive wounds, and each was stabbed multiple times. She wouldn't provide any more information on the number of wounds on each victim or where on the body they were stabbed, just saying that the wounds were pretty extensive and that the victims had bled out. Dr. Mabbutt was visibly shaken by what she observed at the house. She told CNN that there were, lots of blood on the wall when she arrived. There are shocking photos online of what appeared to be blood dripping down the foundation on the side of the house outside. Quote, "It's pretty traumatic when there's 4 dead college students who've been stabbed to death in one location," Dr. Mabbutt said. I've been coroner for 16 years. We have had multiple victim murders in the past, but nothing like this. Dr. Mabbitt put the time of death as early in the morning, sometime after 2 a.m. Dr. Mabbitt said she could not determine from the injuries the order in which the victims were attacked. In other words, and I think this is a question that keeps coming up, there was no way to tell who died first, second, and so on. Dr. Mabbitt collected nail clippings from each of the victims. She also collected swabs of their persons in hopes that DNA from a third party would show up when the samples were analyzed. There was no evidence that any of the victims had been sexually assaulted. Jeff Kernodle said in a TV interview that he was told by the coroner that Zaina exhibited wounds that indicated she had tried to fight off her attacker. He told a local Phoenix-based television station, quote, "Bruises torn by the knife. She's a tough kid." An entire page of the probable cause affidavit that seemingly addresses the autopsy reports is redacted, so we can't determine whether any of the victims were treated differently or singled out somehow at this point.
Now, as for the crime scene, police initially confirmed that they found 2 victims on the second floor and 2 victims on the third floor. However, they would not address who was found where, although the coroner did state, as we heard, that the victims were found in bed. But this is all shocking to everyone. I mean, you have 6 people who are asleep in a house, 4 were stabbed to death, and the other 2 were left unharmed. So in order to try to understand this, we need to get a good sense of the location and also the layout of the house. The 1122 King Road house is located off campus near Greek Row and is on a tightly packed residential block where the houses are very close together. Now, most of the homes in this area are rentals that are typically leased to students for the school year. And of course, that was the case with this house. So this house was a 3-story, 6-bedroom, 3-bathroom house. The 6 occupants had just taken on the lease on January 5th, 2022. Now, the 6th roommate had not ended up moving in when school began in August. There were 2 bedrooms and a bathroom on each floor. The kitchen and the living room were on the second floor. So what was unique about this house is that it was built into a hillside. So it's sort of an odd layout. You have the ground floor accessible by a door from the parking area at street level right outside. And on the second floor, you have the majority of the living space. It also has a patio off the back of the house, kind of by the kitchen. It's sort of a top of the hill that the house was built into. Then you have a sliding door that opens from the patio right into the kitchen. Then the third floor has a large balcony, but no access from the street or exterior at all. Now, very importantly, police found no sign of forced entry. Of course, this begs the question of whether the students would have locked the doors at night. We have some insight here from the victims' family members. For example, Kaylee's sister, Olivia, told some news outlets that her sister always would lock the door. Then you have Zaina's dad saying that the house had a lock with a number code on the front door. And Olivia did echo this, but she pointed out that, this was a party house and it had been so for generations. So she wasn't sure how private that code was. So no one really knows at this point whether or not the newish tenants had changed the code from the previous tenants. When first responders arrived in response to the 911 call that somebody would not wake up, the police found victims only on the second and third floors. But again, they would not specify who was found where. But we now know from the probable cause affidavit that Bethany's room was on the ground floor. Dylan and Zaina's rooms were on the second floor, and Ethan, of course, would have been in there with Zaina. And then Kaylee and Maddie were on the third, or what is known as the top floor. The suspected blood dripping on the exterior that Megan referenced before, the chilling photo that many people have seen, this was on the outside of Zaina's bedroom on the second floor. So the police showed up to the house and found an unknown number of college students who were likely friends of Bethany and Dylan. And these friends had been called by the girls. Now, whether they knew what happened, based on the scene, this remains unknown. Now, if they did, which certainly seems likely given how bloody of a scene the coroner described, we can only imagine the level of hysteria in the house when Dylan and Bethany realized that their friends were murdered while the 2 of them slept nearby. Also, we can only wonder how much of the scene was disturbed by all of these people possibly tromping through the house. Police later disclosed that they had located a dog at the house as well. Now, this dog was Jack and Kaylee's dog, Murphy, whom we referenced earlier. The dog was found in Kaylee's room on the third floor. Now, officers did not find any evidence that the dog had entered into the crime scene. This was not on the dog nor in the crime scene. The dog was taken to animal services and released to a responsible person, whom we can assume was Jack, as later photos would reveal him with the dog. It has not been determined where the dog was physically located when the murders actually took place, but it seems like Kaylee's door was open and the dog had been allowed to roam around. Now, some speculate that the killer placed the dog in the room and closed the door, deliberately leaving it unharmed. Now, police did not address whether they believe the dog was spared by the killer or whether the dog perhaps had not come in contact with the killer at all.
Now, the Moscow authorities are unaccustomed to this type of horrific crime, attracting international scrutiny. They were not used to having to issue statements and hold press conferences constantly, and their inexperience with public communication became apparent quickly. When investigators released the names of the slain students on the 14th, the mayor told the media that the slayings were a crime of passion. Since police had said nothing about a motive, who the target was, or anything along those lines, he quickly had to retract that statement, saying to Fox News Digital that a motive had not been narrowed down yet. No one could say whether it was a crime of passion or not. Things kind of worsened in the wake of a Moscow Police Department press release on November 15th that said, quote, "We determined early in the investigation that we do not believe there is an ongoing threat for community members. Evidence indicates that this was a targeted attack." The statement seemed to some premature. The investigation was only 2 days old at that time, and if they knew it was a targeted attack and there was no ongoing threat, presumably, they would have had a suspect in mind and arrest, maybe imminent, but that wasn't the case. By day 4, Police Chief Jason Fry adjusted that statement, saying, quote, "We cannot say that there is no threat to the community." In other words, at that point, they really did not know who did it or why. Per CNN, quote, Aaron Snell, communication director for Idaho State Police, told CNN that there could potentially be more than one person responsible for the killings. He also reiterated that police still believe it was a targeted attack, partly because of evidence found at the scene and the fact that 2 people in the house survived. On November 16th, Moscow Police Department held another press conference. Police Chief James Fry updated the public on some of the facts that had been previously unknown. Specifically, he relayed the following facts: that there were 2 additional roommates in the home during the attack, that there were no signs of forced entry, as Amy discussed earlier. Nothing appeared to be missing from the home, so robbery did not appear to be a motive, and that the FBI and Idaho State Police were assisting with the investigation. Chief Fry was pretty blunt. He said, "We do not have a suspect at this time, and the individual is still out there. We cannot say that there is no threat to the community, and as we have stated, please stay vigilant, report any suspicious activity, and be aware of your surroundings at all times." People in Moscow were frightened by this surreal-seeming slaughter of 4 of their own. Students left town in droves. People were double-locking their doors, businesses closed early, the streets emptied out at night, and rumors started to spread. Conspiracy theories, serial killers, wild speculation about love triangles, you name it, it was out there. Investigators were in the tough position of wanting to protect the integrity of the investigation and wanting to protect the victims' families and innocent bystanders from accusations and innuendo. A November 25th press release stated the following: "At this time, no suspect has been identified, and only vetted information that does not hinder the investigation will be released to the public. There is speculation without factual backing, stoking community fears and spreading false facts. We encourage referencing official releases for accurate information and updated progress." All right, Amy, so what were some of these rumors? One of the most cited was that Kaylee was being stalked by someone, and I know that everyone has heard that, or I know that most people have. Of course, rumors about a stalker were of great interest to men and women charged with figuring out who murdered 4 college students in their beds. A press release stated the following: "Investigators have looked extensively into information received about Kaylee having a stalker. They have pursued hundreds of pieces of information related to this topic, but have not verified or identified a stalker. Anyone with information about a potential stalker or unusual instances is asked to contact the tip line." Police stated later that it was possible this stemmed from an incident in mid-October when a man followed Kaylee into and out of a store, but they determined that he was not connected to the murders. Another rumor that was followed up on was a connection between the Moscow case and two other cases: a 1999 double stabbing in Pullman, Washington, and a 2021 double stabbing with one death in Salem, Oregon. A press release read, "While these cases share similarities with the King Street homicides, there does not appear to be any evidence to support the cases are related." Yet another rumor made national news when a family who lived 3 miles from the murder scene reported that their dog had been found skinned. This was on October 21st. Again, police debunked any link between the incidents. Quote, "Detectives are aware of a Lotta County Sheriff's Office incident of the report of a skinned dog, but do not believe there is any evidence to support it's related to this incident." Other rumors that a police press release dismissed: that the identity of the 911 caller had been made public, online reports that the victims had been tied and gagged, and that a weapon had been located. All of these rumors were untrue. One incident police have not addressed is a vandal alert that went out to the entire University of Idaho community on September 12th. Apparently, a group of University of Idaho students walking across campus was threatened with a knife by a white male aged 18 to 22 dressed in all black. The vandal alert warned students about a threat with knife. The Moscow Police Department received a report that a group of students was walking between the steam plant parking lot, which is lot number 14, and the Student Recreation Center on Paradise Path, and were threatened by a person with a knife. Whether there's a connection between this incident and the murders is unknown at this point. We'll return after a brief word from our sponsors.
If you love smash burgers, the crispy edges, bold, beefy flavor, you need to try Omaha Steaks' all-new smash burgers. They're pre-smashed, made with 100% extra-aged beef, and grill-ready. No mess, no griddle. I tossed a few on the grill last weekend, straight from freezer to bun in just 5 minutes. The sear? Perfect. The flavor? Rich, juicy, and seriously next level. Way better than anything I've had from the store. Plus, I grabbed the Built for the Grill pack at omahasteaks.com/smash and scored 16 smash burgers free. With high-quality meats always on hand, I'm already eyeing my next order. Maybe there's steak burgers or that killer bacon-wrapped filet. Family-owned since 1917, Omaha Steaks brings 5 generations of premium quality delivered right to your door. Smash burger lovers, this is your moment. Get ready to smash expectations with new Omaha Steaks smash burgers. Visit omahasteaks.com/smash and order the Built for the Grill pack with 16 free smash burgers. That's 16 free Omaha Steaks smash burgers at omahasteaks.com/smash. See site for details.
Okay, now I'm going to talk a little bit about the investigation that was undertaken. Moscow authorities took pains to reassure the public that the small department had called in all available resources to work this case. Quote, "The Moscow Police Department is utilizing assistance from the Idaho State Police, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the Lotta County Sheriff's Office." So they had a really large team working this, and you have 3 departments, again, working together to try to solve this crime. We also know some of the investigative avenues that were pursued thanks to a press release and the probable cause affidavit. Specifically, 113 pieces of physical evidence were collected and taken to the Idaho State Police Crime Lab. Approximately 4,000 crime scene photographs were taken. Experts developed multiple 3-dimensional scans of the residence as well. Governor Brad Little directed up to $1 million in state emergency funds for the ongoing investigation. Interviews were conducted of everyone from the DoorDash delivery driver to the grub truck operator to the guy in the white hoodie and so on. And video surveillance footage was collected from the bar, the grub truck, and so on. A video canvass was conducted to gather all video footage for the night of November 13th that was captured on private surveillance cameras in the area surrounding the King Road home where the murder occurred. Thousands of tips and leads called in by the public were pursued as well. In a recent press release, the Moscow authorities put in writing that they have cleared some people of involvement. This was done to dispel rumors and protect innocent people from public scrutiny and speculation, as we know that a lot of innocent people were named. At this time in the investigation, the detectives do not believe the following are involved in this crime: Dylan and Bethany, the surviving roommates, the male in the Grub truck surveillance video. Again, this is the guy in the white hoodie seen with Kaylee and Maddie. The private party driver who took Kaylee and Madison home on November 13th. You referenced the identity earlier of this person is not known. The male that Kaylee and Madison called numerous times during the early morning hours of November 13th. This was Jack. It's worth noting that Olivia said she and her family stand behind Jack 100% and know that he had absolutely nothing to do with this at all. And any individual at the residence when 911 was called, those unnamed friends summoned by Bethany and Dylan specifically.
Now that the police have released the probable cause affidavit, we have a lot of information on what actually happened that night. Bethany, whose room was on the first floor, saw and heard nothing amiss that night. However, Dylan on the second floor was a whole other story. Now, the following will be read directly from the probable cause affidavit released by the Moscow Police Department. Now, in the affidavit, it refers to Dylan as DM. Just for clarity, I will be reading the name as Dylan, although the affidavit does say DM. So, according to the affidavit, Dylan stated she originally went to sleep in her bedroom on the southeast side of the second floor. Dylan stated that she was awoken at approximately 4 a.m. by what she stated sounded like Consalves playing with her dog in one of the upstairs bedrooms, which were located on the third floor. A short time later, Dylan said she heard what she thought was Consalves say something to the effect of "there's someone here." Dylan stated that she looked out of her bedroom but did not see anything when she heard the comment about someone being in the house. Dylan stated she opened the door a second time when she heard what she thought was crying coming from Kernodle's room. Dylan then said she heard a male voice say something to the effect of, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." At approximately 4:17 a.m., a security camera located at 1112 King Road, a residence immediately to the northwest of 1122 King Road. The camera is just 50 feet from the west wall of Zaina's bedroom, picked up a distorted audio of what sounded like voices or a whimper, followed by a loud thud. A dog can also be heard barking numerous times at 4:17 a.m. And here's the most terrifying part of all. Dylan stated that she opened the door for the third time after she heard the crying, and she saw a figure clad in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's nose and mouth walking toward her. Dylan described the figure as 5'10" or taller, male, not very muscular, but athletically built, with bushy eyebrows. The male walked past Dylan as she stood in a frozen shock phase. The male walked toward the back sliding glass door. Dylan locked herself in her room after seeing the male. Dylan did not state that she recognized the male. Now, this all begs the question of why Dylan did not call 911 right away. And this information has not been released. However, there are many possibilities that exist, such as her being frozen in terror. Maybe she fell asleep. Perhaps she was inebriated and passed out. Maybe she just did not believe what she was seeing. In time, I'm sure things will become a little bit clearer. So how did they catch this guy? It was a convergence of factors that pointed to the suspect, really. For one thing, the video canvas revealed a lot of video of the same white sedan. Now, this car was seen driving westbound towards the murder scene on the night of the 13th on various roads in and around Moscow. Multiple videos also showed what appeared to be the same car making 3 passes by the King Road house starting at 3:29 a.m. And as the probable cause affidavit says, quote, "Based off my experience as a patrol officer, this is a residential neighborhood with a very limited number of vehicles that travel in the area during the early morning hours. Upon review of the video, there are only a few cars that enter and exit the area during this time frame." In other words, this one car driving past the house multiple times during the minutes leading up to the time of the murders is very suspicious. And then the video showed the same vehicle entering the area a 4th time at 4:04 a.m. And this time it appeared to unsuccessfully attempt to park or turn around in the road. Now, it can be seen completing a 3-point turn and then driving eastbound again down Queen Road. This suspected vehicle is next seen departing the area of the King Road residence at approximately 4:20 a.m. at a high rate of speed. Police suspected, based on the footage of the white car leaving the neighborhood, that it was headed out of town. It was on a road which leads to Pullman, Washington, which was about 10 miles away. The FBI's vehicle forensic examiners were able to identify the white sedan as a Hyundai Elantra model years 2014 to 2016. In what appears to have been just good police work, investigators pulled November 13th footage from Washington State University in Pullman and noted a white Elantra departing Pullman at 2:53 a.m. and headed towards Moscow, then returning a few hours later. By 5:25 a.m., the white sedan was headed back into Pullman. There was no front license plate visible on this vehicle. And this is important because we will come to find out that Pennsylvania does not require a front plate and Idaho does. At the request of Moscow authorities, on November 29th, Washington State University personnel pulled a list of white Elantras registered to students and located a 2015 white Elantra with a Pennsylvania license plate. This vehicle was registered to Brian Koberger. His apartment was 3/4 of a mile from the location where the Elantra was seen returning to campus on the same date of the murders. Another Washington State University police officer later found a 2015 white Elantra in the parking lot of a student apartment complex. This car had Washington tags and was also registered to Brian Koberger. Additionally, a driver's license photo showed that he met the description of the masked man who had been seen by Dylan, right down to the bushy eyebrows. It turned out that Koberger's Pennsylvania plates were set to expire at the end of November, and he had recently switched to the Washington plates. In fact, it was just 5 days after the murders that he made this switch. Investigators then ran Koberger's cell phone records. They got his number off of a police report from a traffic stop that occurred in Moscow on August 21st, 2022. And this is a time in which he got pulled over driving that Elantra. He actually had another stop on October 14th, 2022 by Washington State University police. For someone who's trying not to attract police attention, he seems to be racking up a lot of traffic infractions. Now, Koberger's phone records for the night of the 13th tell a very interesting story. Now, they show that he very likely turned his phone off as he approached Moscow in his car. Before that, at 2:42 a.m. on the 13th, the phone was pinging cell towers that provided coverage to the areas near his apartment. The cell phone started to move at 2:47 a.m., traveling south, mirroring the path of the Elantra seen on the video footage amassed by the police. Immediately after this, the phone stopped pinging. Now, this is indicating that it was either shut off or put in airplane mode. It then came back on at 4:48 a.m. just south of Moscow, traveling south to Genesee, Idaho, and then toward Uniontown, Idaho, and then traveled to Pullman. Now, this is all between 4:48 a.m. and 5:26 a.m. This was in a U-shaped route that initially led from Moscow away from Pullman in a move that police say was designed to throw them off because the phone in the car then travels back to the apartment at 5:27 a.m. Something else interesting happens because the phone travels from Pullman to the King Road area in Moscow that same morning at 9:12 a.m., just hours after the brutal murders. It had also moved from Pullman to an Alberton grocery store that afternoon around 12:49 p.m. And at the store, Koberger purchased some unspecified items. The affidavit says, quote, "The route of travel of the phone during the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022, and the lack of phone reporting between 2:47 a.m. and 4:48 a.m. is consistent with Koberger attempting to conceal his location during the quadruple homicide." Investigators, on a hunch that Koberger had stalked out the King Road house before the fatal night, pulled his phone records from June 2022 on. The records show that the phone was in the King Road area on 12 occasions prior to November 13th, and on 11 of those occasions, it was in the wee morning hours. It certainly seems that based on this alone, prosecutors will be able to make a strong argument that this was, in fact, a premeditated crime. In mid-December, Koberger left town for winter break and drove across country with his father to Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. On December 15th, he was pulled over twice in 10 minutes for tailgating in Indiana. Reports are that cops were instructed to pull him over and try to obtain body cam footage of his hands. Now, this was likely to look for cuts. This is interesting, though, because the probable cause affidavit does not indicate that they found his blood on the scene, and there's no mention of prints being found, as he likely wore gloves. Either way, he was let go with warnings in both of these stops.
And now, a brief word from our sponsors.
So they have Kohberger owning a vehicle that is consistent with the one seen driving between Moscow and Pullman at the approximate time of the murders. And Megan, this is not all they have. Early in the investigation, Moscow investigators went to various retailers in the area asking about knife sales, and some of the employees spoke to the media. The Idaho Statesman reported that a Rambo-style fixed-blade combat knife was used on the victims, and this was based on reports by local store owners who were questioned by police. In fact, the Statesman reported that police were focusing on a K-Bar brand knife, which manufactures military-grade blades that were originally designed for use by American troops in World War II. Thanks to the probable cause affidavit, we now know that they were seeking this specific knife. They had found a tan leather knife sheath with K-Bar USMC on it lying on the bed in Maddie's room, and there was a single source of male DNA on the snap. It has been reported by media outlets around the world that forensic genealogy was used by investigators to identify Bryan Kohberger. In fact, CNN reported that 2 law enforcement sources informed them that this was the case. Now, if that was done, investigators would have taken the DNA from the knife sheath and run it through open source DNA databases, such as GenMatch and Family Tree DNA. And this would be done to track down family members and used to construct family trees as a way to pinpoint Bryan's identity. However, this was not the case. Once Kohberger was at his parents' house in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, on December 27th, the police executed a trash pull and sent some of the evidence in for DNA analysis. Just the next day, on December 28th, 2022, the Idaho State Lab reported that a DNA profile obtained from the trash and the DNA profile obtained from the sheath identified a male as not being excluded as the biological father of the suspect. At least 99.9998% of the male population would be expected to be excluded from the possibility of being the suspect's biological father. Now, essentially, what this means is that they had the right family. The item they pulled out of the Kohberger's trash can belonged to the suspect's father. So it is clear that the DNA found at the scene matched one of his children. We have found several reports that Bryan does in fact have 2 older sisters, but that they live on the East Coast. A latent shoe print was also found at the crime scene inside of the house. A diamond-shaped sole pattern was detected right outside of Dylan's bedroom door, and this was consistent with Van shoes. It remains to be seen whether investigators will locate any shoes that match the tread pattern in Kohberger's possession.
Now, it turns out that investigators were watching and tracking Kohberger as he drove across the country with his father, and his parents' house was surveilled by an FBI team for 4 days after his arrival there. The New York Post reports that in the days after Kohberger arrived home, a source who was on the surveillance team observed him go into a giant food store and keep his gloves on the entire time. People have posited theories that he was careful to not leave DNA or prints in public, but I think it's also possible that it's cold and he had gloves on, so this will remain to be seen. On December 30th, Pennsylvania police carried out a pre-dawn raid of the Kohberger home and arrested him. Reportedly, he expressed shock and asked if anyone else had also been arrested. They impounded and searched his vehicle, which likely would have traces of blood in it unless he wrapped the seat in plastic, and executed a search warrant for a swab to obtain his DNA. So who is Bryan Kohberger? Bryan Christopher Kohberger, 28, grew up in eastern Pennsylvania, not far from where I live. He graduated from Pleasant Valley High School in Broadheadsville. Students said he was very intelligent but was picked on for being overweight. He overcame a heroin addiction in high school, lost the weight, and reportedly became a bully himself. He worked as a security guard in the Pleasant Valley School District for a few years until 2021 while obtaining his degree in psychology from a local community college. He then enrolled in a criminal justice program at DeSales University where he studied under Dr. Kathleen Ramsland. Now, I just want to point out here that I'm very familiar with her work, as she's one of the leading scholars in the country on serial killers. In fact, I interviewed her for another podcast we have in production. Back to Kohberger. He received his bachelor's degree in 2020 and a master's in 2022. He then moved to Pullman, where he's currently a PhD student in criminology at Washington State University. Other students described him as intense. The New York Times says other students considered him the black sheep of the program. Quote, often taking contrarian viewpoints and sometimes getting into arguments with his peers, particularly women. As a TA in a criminal law class, he was a harsh grader, reportedly did not look students in the eye, and was termed super awkward. Some of the work he did in connection with his education is of interest to investigators. For example, he wrote an essay on assisting rural law enforcement agencies with how to better collect and analyze technological data in public safety operations. He also posted a Reddit survey about 7 months ago, and this was the survey that most people have had access to and have been discussing. This survey asked people who had spent time in prison to provide information to, quote, understand how emotions and psychological traits influence decision-making when committing a crime. He also applied for an internship at the Pullman Police Department in the fall of 2022. Meanwhile, some people who interacted with Kohberger reported that he had made creepy comments to female staff at a brewery near his hometown and once called a worker a bitch for rejecting his advances, the proprietor told NBC. Kohberger is a strict vegan and made his parents reportedly use pots and pans that had never touched meat. But he did have a leather knife sheath, I just want to point out. And Ant said his very strange eating habits showed OCD tendencies. The Latah County Jail said it will not go to extra lengths to accommodate his vegan diet. After his first appearance in court in Pennsylvania, Monroe County Chief Public Defender Jason Labar told CNN, quote, Mr. Kohberger is eager to be exonerated of these charges and looks forward to resolving these matters as promptly as possible. According to the New York Times, Mr. Labar issued a statement from Kohberger's parents and two sisters saying that they, quote, love and support our son and brother and had cooperated with the police in an effort to promote his presumption of innocence. They also offered prayers for the victims here. Brian Kohberger waived extradition to Idaho and was flown across the country on Wednesday, January 4th. He was booked into the Latah County Jail on 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary. He made his first appearance in Idaho on Thursday, where the judge served him with the arrest warrant and probable cause affidavit and denied bail.
Of course, it remains to be seen whether Brian Kohberger will be found guilty at trial or takes a plea. As of now, he is a suspect and innocent until proven guilty, and one who has stated through his attorney that he plans to fight the allegations against him. But as we all wait, I'm sure we all wonder about motive. Many theorize that he was eager to use his criminology training to pull off the perfect crime. He did some things right. He turned off his phone, he wore a mask, he disposed of the murder weapon, which of course police have been unable to locate at this point. But if he's guilty, he also made some big mistakes. He drove his own car to the scene time and time again. He left a living witness in the house, one who had seen him. And most egregious of all, he left the knife sheath behind with its incriminating microscopic DNA on the snap. He will have a hard time explaining away the sheath, one that fits the exact size weapon that is suspected to have been used and was actually found in the bed with 2 of the victims. Now, Idaho is a death penalty state, so death is on the table. However, the last execution carried out there was a decade ago in 2012. Regardless, I think all eyes will be on this case to see what happens. For a more in-depth discussion on this case, you can check out our YouTube channel, which can be found by searching Women in Crime Podcast.
Thank you, everyone, for listening today to this special coverage of this breaking case. We hope you'll join us next time on Campus Killings.
Campus Killings is hosted by Dr. Megan Sachs and Dr. Amy Schlossberg, with research and writing by Jessica Betancourt. It's produced by Mike Morford of AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to follow Campus Killings on social media. You can find Campus Killings on Twitter with the handle @CampusKillings or on Facebook at facebook.com/campuskillings. You can also visit the show's homepage at campuskillings.com. Be sure to tune in every other Saturday for new episodes of Campus Killings.